builds targeted at high elo players. We are super excited to start this series for you guys, so make sure to let us know your thoughts on it. We want to continue to create content that you guys want to see, so if this is something that you want to see more of, please tell us. If not, let us know as well, or instead let us know what can be improved upon. So many different champions are receiving balance changes, meaning that a bunch of questions now need to be answered. Finally, for today's question of the day, which champion do you think needed a balance change but did not receive one on this patch? For me, I really still think that Kassadin for the mid lane is pretty darn OP. And also, before we get started, are you getting ganked in your own lane, constantly demolished? Well, don't worry, because we've got you covered. Pro Guides is the #1 proven way to quickly level up your League of Legends skills. Whether you are looking for tier lists, champion guides, coaching, or courses from your favorite pro players, Pro Guides is where you'll find them. Even players like Nightblue, Bunny Fufu, Boxbox, and Loco Doco support Pro Guides, so what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description down below and start improving right now, and with all that being said, let's jump right into the video. As we run through this video, we are going to highlight the big changes and point out the most significant points of each tier list. For general understanding of this tier list, here is a guideline. S tier champions are always going to be a good pick, no matter what. A tier champions are strong picks, but do have a couple of flaws or counterplay. B tier champions are strong picks that can sometimes be just as good as A or S tier champions, as long as they're under the right circumstances. For C tier champions, they are just niche picks that can do well, but are usually going to be suboptimal. You will see a one trick here or there find success, but generally speaking, not many other players will be able to replicate it. D tier champions are ones that there will often be a way better pick suited for every single scenario, but there might still be one or two situations where they could be good, but there are plenty of other champions that are much more solid picks in those situations, as well as many others. These tier lists are also not ordered unless specified. In the top lane, the biggest balance changes that we see to this patch are Garen, Darius, Mordekaiser, and Gnar. While Gnar and Garen did receive some buffs to their abilities, all 4 of these champions have received some changes that are aimed at making them viable junglers. Since these are newer picks in the jungle, we're going to hold off on placing them in jungle tiers until next time. However, what this does mean for them as top laners is that they now might have the potential to be a flex pick. Whenever they're locked in, there is no guarantee anymore that the Gnar or the Darius is essentially 100% of the time going to go top, and this might leave an element of mystery during champion select, meaning that they'll get counterpicked much less often. Otherwise, it is possible to trade them to the jungler and switch off to a better pick, so long as the players on the team agree to do that. For Darius, his Q will now heal off of jungle monsters, and the passive bleed will deal 120% damage to them. For Garen, his E will deal 150% damage to monsters. The Mordekaiser passive damage will deal extra damage to monsters, being increased from 15 to 100 up to 25 to 120 instead. And for Gnar, his mini W will actually have the damage cap pushed up to 300 flat instead of scaling from 100 to 300. Overall, these changes create flex pick potential and also make it so that these champions will be able to farm their own jungle camps more quickly during downtime. If they ever have opportunity to do so, they will be stronger counter junglers if they ever have the chance to walk into the enemy jungle. In our S tier, we have Ornn, Sett, Darius, Kled, and Shen. While the middle 3 are interchangeable, Ornn is easily the strongest top laner in high elo games, while Shen barely made the cut for S tier this patch. The biggest changes made to these champions found on this patch were the buffs to Sunfire Cape and Balmy Cinder. Even before these buffs, they were still solid picks, and the increased damage output that they now have should really push them to the next level. By picking Ornn alone, your team is already at an advantage in terms of gold. If your games are ever even, your team intrinsically has a gold lead because of the item upgrades that he can provide. There are still stompy games and random goofs that can happen in high elo, but a lot less often. Essentially, there are more games that go even, and Ornn pulls his team ahead in those ones, snowballs his team even harder when they're winning, and provides a late game assurance when his team is behind. For Shen, he was typically an A tier champion due to the fact that some matchups might be pretty rough for him, but with the Sunfire Cape buff, he has to swing his way into S tier. He's going to take matchups that were either in his favor or even make losing ones even easier to deal with now, and it should be pretty close to even. Shen is almost always going to be a good pick regardless because of his ultimate and the amount of map pressure that he provides, so if Ornn is ever banned or picked, another great option for a tank is Shen. Darius' jungle changes are absolutely huge for him. He's already an oppressive solo queue superstar, but he'll now be able to go heal off of Krugs when he's on red side. Whenever he's chunked or needs some extra health, he can simply walk over onto the camp, queue it, and walk back into lane with some extra health. And this kind of thing for a top laner is going to be seen much more often, with all of them receiving some jungle buffs. Jace is a pick that's generally considered pretty weak, but his win rates in Challenger are ridiculously strong. The most elite players are really able to bring out the best in Jace and really use his strengths, and the buffs that he received this patch should only increase his impact on games. Alright, let's move on to the jungle. Aside from the increased jungle pool, we also have a buff to Cinderhulk and buffs for Amumu and Rammus. Aside from the Cinderhulk buff, these changes are not super significant, but are definitely going to help out those two tank junglers who are not typically seen in high elo. In our S tier, we have Lee Sin, Elise, Rek'Sai, Karthus, Kha'Zix, and Graves. These guys are absolutely killing it in high elo, and while Lee Sin's win rate continues to disappoint players, his high play rate as well as the general consensus of high elo players would indicate that he is easily one of the best junglers in the game. He's a little bit difficult if you decide to be autofilled and pick Lee Sin instead of Karthus, but hey, he's a strong champion nonetheless. Aside from him, we have other early game junglers like Elise and Rek'Sai, whose game-changing ganks can really change up the tempo of games altogether. Their insane damage output and the CC they provide really makes a big impact during the early game, and not a lot of ways that other junglers can do. On that same note, we have some late game junglers like Karthus, Graves, and even Kha'Zix to some extent. These guys deal so much damage, and Karthus' ultimate is something that high elo players really milk to oblivion. Karthus hits 6, well, I guess it's time to all in my opponent and get him a kill. The other two guys shine in high elo because they can abuse the power of the champions. A combination of mechanics and decision making really allows many players to pull ahead, and then go ahead and dominate their games with all of these S tier picks. It's worth noting as well that picks like Nunu, Zac, and Sejuani are also going to be stronger this patch as a result of the Cinderhulk buffs, so I can definitely see some scenarios where these champions are great and they're the best picks who can frontline for their teams and provide something that their team is lacking. Alright, time to move on to the mid lane. Those jungle changes for these unconventional junglers also transfers over to the mid lane. For Talon, his passive will now work on large monsters, and it deals 120% damage to them. For Zed, his energy restore now works on monsters, and his passive damage is increased by 100% against large monsters. So just like in the top lane, these champions can now have some flex potential into the jungle, meaning that they're safer to pick during champion select. If they ever get a bad matchup, players could in theory fork them over to their junglers instead. In S tier, we have Kiana, Diana, Cassiopeia, Vladimir, Fizz, Ekko, Talon, and Zed. Assassins are dominating Summoner's Rift right now. LeBlanc fell just short of S tier as well, but confidently holds the highest spot in A tier. Talon and Zed held extremely high win rates in Diamond Plus last patch, tapering off gradually as they approach Challenger. With their jungle changes, they should find some more success in Master as well as Challenger level games. A big reason for this is despite of their flexibility in the draft, on top of that these champions can now better funnel themselves. They should have an even easier time farming up their own raptors or counter jungling the enemies away in between the waves. The rest of these guys held insanely high win rates in the mid lane last patch, and this is primarily because of how much damage they deal and how hard they can carry fights by one-shotting their main targets. Cassiopeia is just a busted champion as she's always a solid pick in 3 roles, flexing into and dominating them all. While we expected to see Rumble take a pretty big hit following his nerfs last patch, he's surprisingly held a pretty high win rate in the very high level brackets. He's not finding the same success in Diamond, but in Master and Challenger level games, Rumble is still killing it. It's probably because those Rumble players are so good at the champion, they're going to be able to utilize him the best. Surprisingly though, Akali is still in a very rough spot even after some hotfixes, which significantly increased her damage. Alongside Xerath, Akali holds one of, if not the lowest win rates in all of higher elo. Maybe she'll need another buff, maybe she'll need to be removed from the game, who knows, only time will tell. Alright, let's move on to the bottom lane. In the bottom lane, there were basically no balance changes made. Caitlyn technically had a little buff to her bonus attack speed at level 1, which should give her some of her power back, but she'll likely remain a weaker pick in high elo for now. She relied a ton on her insane headshot mechanics, which were patched pretty recently. Unlucky that it was considered a bug, but I'm pretty sure she will slowly receive some buffs if she still continues to underperform in higher brackets of play. Now we should talk about Reddit's favorite champion, which is Aphelios. Oh boy, this guy received some changes. You can now see both of his guns on his health bar. A caliber mark now grants 1 instead of 2 auto attack resets. Turrets only attack 3 times. Turrets now take 3 damage instead of 2 from ranged attacks. And AoE spells now deal 4 instead of 2. And his ultimate's range has been reduced from 1600 to 1300. This is a pretty big set of nerfs, and it will force him out of S tier in high elo, but he will still be in A tier. In S tier, we have MF, Senna, Kalista, Cassiopeia, and Heimerdinger. Misfortune has proven for several patches now that she's easily the best marksman in the game. Well, at least her laning ability and the ability to snowball make it seem that way. However, Senna and Kalista are picks that are dominating high elo specifically. She's been slowly making her comeback, and last patch, Kalista actually held a 53% win rate in Diamond Plus. She tapers off heavily around Challenger, but for the majority of high elo players, Kalista is leading to a ton of success. Just like in mid and top lane, Cassiopeia is a dominant pick in the bot lane as well, while Heimerdinger is easily the most oppressive bot laner in the entire lane to play against. Caitlyn's got a lot weaker, which means Heimer has more opportunities to shine as the true lane bully of bot lane, stealing everybody's lunch money. Unsurprisingly, picks like Ezreal, in spite of their very low win rates in lower elo, hold decent win rates in higher brackets. His skill ceiling implicates that only the best of the best players can really bring out his full potential. Vayne is also another pick seeing a lot of success, but her win rate curve is the opposite of Ezreal's. It's pretty high around low diamond, but as you go higher, it begins to drop, and that's probably because if you're a Vayne player in Challenger, you're gonna get smashed around by the likes of a Kalista, a Senna, a really good Draven player, stuff like that, people who can punish you. If you try to play Vayne in Challenger versus a Heimerdinger, good luck. Finally, let's finish it off with support. Soraka and Sona have received nerfs to finally put them back in their place as supports instead of the top lane. Sona's changes are pretty simple. Her Q, W, and E have all had their mana costs increased by 25. However, they all refund 30 mana if one of her allies also receives the aura, which of course is intended to put her back as a support. Soraka's changes, however, are pretty hefty. Of them, the most notable one is that her self-healing from Q is going down significantly, dropping from 60 to 140 to 40 to 80. The mana cost is also increasing by 20 at all ranks, and the bonus movement speed is also taking a hit, maxing out at 20% instead of 35%. However, while rejuvenated, Soraka's W will now cost less of her health. With 1 point in W, she'll have the health cost reduced by 40%, while the ability is maxed, it'll reduce the cost by 100%. This is going to mean that in the later stages of the game, Soraka will not need to take as many risks during the team fights, and she can actually just go ahead and spam her heal, and she won't be taking so much damage as well. This is going to mean that maybe late game Soraka is just as powerful as before, but the early laning phase is going to be a nightmare, and she's going to drop because of it. In S tier, we have Thresh, Leona, Blitzcrank, and Bard. These 4 have been steamrolling through high elo. The amount of impact that they have on their games with the CC, pick making, and lane dominance really allow them to take over games. Some defensive supports like Nami, Soraka, Janet, and Taric have solidified their places in A tier because they're still powerful picks overall. However, high elo games rely a lot more on pressing leads instead of just sitting passively and waiting for stuff to happen. So those more aggressive support picks in high elo are really going to impact side lanes and make their own play a bigger part in their games. For Bard, he has been killing it with his new build. Even in high elo, players are running the Dead Man's Plate rapid fire cannon build. With it, Bard has so much movement speed, increased damage, and can play even more aggressively than before. It gives him a bunch of tools to make plays with, most notably his ult and his portal, so it's no surprise that even challenger players are taking to him currently. Anyway, that's going to cover our high-elo tier list for patch 10.4. Thank you guys very much for watching. Once again, make sure to check out ProGuides.com as well as our YouTube channel for content just like this. Also, let us know what you thought of the video. We are always reading your comments and trying to improve from them. So until next time, best of luck on the Rift Summoners, and I'll see you all next time.